Welcome to the Decipher podcast. I'm Dennis Fisher, editor-in-chief at Decipher. With me today is Lindsey O'Donnell-Welch, my colleague. We're going to talk a little bit about this AT&T data breach that was disclosed this morning, actually. And Lindsey, I've been doing this for more than 2 decades, and this is one of the most severe incidents I can recall. We were talking about this before we started recording. There are data breaches, and then there are data breaches, and this, I think, falls into that former category.
Yeah. Capital D, capital B. It's not great.
No, not at all. Just to give people a little context, they put out a short 8K this morning, excuse me, and said that they discovered this incident on April 19th, 2024. And I'm just going to read a couple sentences from the 8K to give people the scope of this. It says current analysis indicates that the data includes, for these periods of time, records of calls and texts of nearly all of AT&T's wireless customers and customers of mobile virtual network operators using AT&T's wireless network. For a subset of records, one or more cell site identification numbers are also included. That is terrifying and really troubling because if you look at that second sentence, you can't specifically identify people from that information, but if you know how to use the internet, there are very simple ways to identify phone numbers with people in cell site identifiers. So it's about as big as I can possibly imagine something being in this kind of thing. It doesn't seem to include financial records or anything like this. This is call records. We need to be clear about this. This is not, credit card numbers. At this point, there's no information on that. It's call records, but that's really personal information for a massive, massive number of people.
Yeah, I mean, they said nearly all. That's really unheard of for, something of AT&T's caliber and
Yeah.
size. That's
I
a lot.
I don't have a good sense of how many customers they have, wireless customers they have, but I would guess it's in the high tens, possibly hundreds of millions in the US. I mean, it's almost impossible to know, but you're talking tens of millions of customers, I would imagine.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think you made a good point too, Dennis, which is, if nearly everyone knows how to do this. If you get an incoming phone call from someone you don't know, I'll just Google it and be like, is this spam or who
Right.
is this? And, it's so easy to figure out how to connect the phone number to a person. And then also that with this subset of stolen records, including the location related data, that's very sensitive and not great data that you want to have compromised in your environment. So it's like a
No,
double whammy there.
it really is. And for people who aren't AT&T customers, they might look at this and think, I don't really care. But I promise you, you have somebody in your contacts who's an AT&T customer and has probably called or texted you, so that makes it even more, the scope of this is even larger. I'm sure I have dozens, if not hundreds of people in my contacts that are AT&T wireless customers. I can think of several right off the top of my head.
Yeah. It really makes me wonder, what happened behind the scenes here. And they said that they did apprehend someone. So or AT&T said that they're aware that the Department of Justice has apprehended one or many or several people related to the incident. So, I'm curious to see who's behind this. And, it seems like they looked at call and text records over specific dates and months as
Mm-hmm.
well. You mentioned between May 1st and October 31st, and then on January 2nd, 2023. That was kind of interesting too. So I don't know if the DOJ is going to release anything on that in the coming future, but
I would
something I'd
imagine they
definitely be
will.
looking for. Yeah.
Yeah. The other interesting thing to me from the law enforcement side is that AT&T mentions in this disclosure that on May 9th of this year and again on June 5th of this year, Department of Justice determined that a delay in providing public disclosure was warranted. So that essentially leads me to think that the FBI was close to, or had identified some people and thought that AT&T disclosing this publicly would you know hamper that investigation. So now they got the go ahead to make this disclosure. So it does say in the 8K that they apprehended at least one person.
Mm-hmm.
This appears like reportedly appears to be related to the Snowflake incident. The timing certainly lines up if you look at the timing of the Snowflake disclosure and the timing that AT&T mentions here. AT&T does not mention that in the 8K, so it's not certain, but the timing certainly lines up, as does sort of the scope and the of the what they went after in the attack. So I mean the fallout from that thing is, I hate to make a terrible snow pun, but the fallout is is gonna continue.
Yeah, I know. It's we've already seen a couple ones coming out of that, like Ticketmaster and whatnot. But your point about the timeline is interesting too, because the SEC came out with its Form 8K filing mandates earlier or last year,
Yeah,
and under that was this exception where just as some background here, you would have to disclose an incident for a publicly traded company within 4 days if it was determined to be material, but if there was an exception, which is that you get some wiggle room if the disclosure was determined that it would impact national security or public safety.
right,
And I'm pretty sure I haven't seen anything thus far that's at least been disclosed that has been granted that exception yet. So, seeing this kind of come out of that was, you know, I think that while rare, like this is definitely going to happen in the future, because you can't just be disclosing something if there are, like you mentioned, like potential leads on the people behind it, or
right.
ongoing concerns about what it might mean for national security.
Yeah, especially in a case like this where it's call records and not financial information or personal information, home addresses and things like that were stolen. There's not a lot that any AT&T customer can really do about this. I mean, there's not, you can't go, change your credit card number to address it. You can't do anything like that. It's your call records, so delaying the disclosure, I don't really think did any harm to anyone. At least that we can tell right now. I can't think of any direct harm. I might be wrong about this. We might get some comments from our lawyer friends on that, but
Yeah.
I don't feel like there was, if FBI was close to arresting someone and had direct leads that they thought the disclosure would harm, I don't see the harm in the delay is what I'm trying to get at, I guess.
Right, right. And it is, looking at what wasn't there, there wasn't social security numbers. Like you said, it's not financial information, no
Yeah.
dates of birth, things like that. Those, in my opinion, would be pieces of information that you would want to let people know right away,
Yeah,
because then they
exactly.
can get ahead of any sort of, fraud related situation that might crop up.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so, um, still it's not a good not a good incident, not a good situation. And by the way, social security numbers were as part of an earlier incident in March that was connected to AT&T, so I feel like I should put that out there.
I know it's been a rough few months, but if this does wind up being connected directly to the Snowflake incident, I think it's gonna, we're gonna see more from that again. But this is probably gonna go down as one of the larger uh, data breaches that we may ever see. Honestly,
I think so, yeah. I mean, I can't recall, like, and obviously you can't either, and you've been
no,
in the space way longer than me, but anything quite as big as this. So, and I'm curious, like, moving forward, what kind of fallout we're going to see from, threat actors having their hands on this type of information, because I do think that, if there is any sort of impact, it's going to be longer term and
right?
be not necessarily something that we could even really track.
Yeah,
So it's yet to be seen, but something we'll keep our eyes out for.
definitely. And you have a story up on the site right now already about this, and we'll be updating that as we go along as we find out more. So people should go check that out at decipher.sc. All right. Thanks, Lindsay. Good to see you.
Thank you.